Cassandra was in pain and ashamed, but worst of all, she was frightened. In fact, she was terrified to the bottom of her soul. Cassandra was a scullery maid at the castle, in other words, a drudge of no account. She had been caught trying to sneak back into the servants' quarters after being outside with him. And when she wouldn't tell them where she had been whipped and condemned to stand in the pillory at the edge of the woods all night. On this particular night, Walpurgis Night, she had begged and pleaded with them to be allowed to serve her sentence within the confines of the castle, but they only laughed at her. Heartily. Instead, they had bent her over and placed her sore and beaten body in the rude pillory which confined her head and her hands. She was then pelted with rotting vegetables and garbage, spat upon and called filthy names by every lout, both male and female, in the village. Cassandra couldn't see what was going on behind her, and she was subjected to kicks and other indignities. Eric, the huge red-haired potboy, couldn't seem to keep his hands off her. But her tormentors all disappeared once it began to get dark. None of them would be abroad tonight. Not tonight, of all nights. Walpurgis Night. Walpurgis Night, April 30th, was a herald of spring, but it was also the night when the forces of darkness held sway, and witches, goblins, and the dead walked the face of the earth, and she would be all alone with them. All alone. In the dark. Unless he came to rescue her. He was a handsome young soldier on guard duty at the castle. A handsome young soldier who had taken a fancy to her, and she to him. Unfortunately, there was no privacy for them in the kitchen, so he had passed her a note to meet him outside after dark. She hadn't meant to stay out all night, but once she was in his arms, she forgot all about time. And then, in the morning, she was caught, but she had remained silent in case he had been absent from his post, and the penalty for that was death. So Cassandra stood there, at the pillory, bent over and in pain, as the night grew progressively darker and colder. Darker and colder. It was, after all, only the end of April. He had to come. He must come. Still, Cassandra couldn't recall seeing him among the crowd of jeering spectators. No doubt he was on duty, or too ashamed to come. But he should know she was true to him, that she had kept his secret. Cassandra felt the approach of the midnight hour. Everything had gone deathly still. And then she heard the sound of approaching footsteps. It was impossible for Cassandra to raise her head, but she could see his dark trousers and his heavy boots as he stood before her. "I knew you would come," she said, bursting into tears. "Oh, I have come," he said softly. But instantly, Cassandra noticed a subtle change in the sound of his voice. It was subtle, but the voice was different. The man knelt before her, and she almost screamed. The man kneeling before her had a jovial moon face, his bald head fringed with a tonsure of dark hair. He looked like a monk, an infernal monk. You're not? Ah, but I am. And as she stared in horror, the man's fat face shimmered, then seemed to melt, and then in front of her were the handsome, youthful features of he. What? Cassandra gulped, then watched as her lover's face reverted and was transformed back into the fat and sensual face of the monk. You may call me Count Todd, he said with a leering smile. What? What are you? What night is this? Oh my God! I don't think he's likely to help you. Count Todd put two podgy hands, as plump as toads, on either side of Cassandra's head and lifted her face, her neck. He leaned towards her, and she tried to pull away, his foul, reeking breath choking her, making her want to vomit, making her, transporting her to bliss, to a greater ecstasy than any she had ever experienced before. For Todd had kissed her. When it was over, Cassandra said lazily, I feel so strange. That's because you're dead, Todd answered primly. Dead? Oh, yes. I killed you. I drained your body of all its essential fluids. Your essence, as it were. You are, quite dead. Cassandra began to wail, but Todd silenced her with an imperious, Be quiet. I have given you eternal life and an opportunity for revenge. Revenge. Don't you wish to take it? Cassandra stared at Todd's fat and sardonic face. It then appeared as the most beautiful countenance she had ever seen, in both life and death. Tell me what I must do, she finally whispered. Eric, the huge red-haired potboy, was up to his elbows in soapy water when Cassandra glided into the kitchen where he was busy at work. He stared at her open mouthed. Who let you out of the pillory, wench? He demanded in his loud, booming voice. My friend. What friend? Death. Eh? Don't you want me, Eric? Cassandra purred in a husky, alluring voice, and suddenly, for Eric, Cassandra was no longer an unkempt and frowsy scullery maid, but the most desirable woman, the most desirable woman in the world. He stepped forward to seize her in his huge wet arms. She turned her lovely, glamorous face up towards him and tore out his throat. The spurting blood jetting across the kitchen and splashing Cassandra's smiling face. The moral of the story: never laugh or jeer at the man or woman locked in the pillory. You may be next. Timothy was hungover, thirsty, but not at all frightened, even though he had been condemned to stand in the pillory at the edge of the woods all night on Walpurgis Night, which was tonight, on Walpurgis Nacht, Walpurgis Night, as on All Hallows Eve, the forces of darkness hold sway, and once again witches, goblins, and the dead walk the face of the earth, and Timothy would be sharing the black hours of the night with them. But he didn't care. He just wanted a beer. And he wanted revenge. Timothy's offense had been public drunkenness, which was his normal state of being, and as he was destitute and unable to pay any fine, it was determined he should learn his lesson by standing in the pillory overnight. Learn his lesson, indeed. But Timothy was a tolerated figure in the village, and unlike some offenders, such as Cassandra the scullery maid, he wasn't showered with spit, rotting fruit, or abuse. But still, Timothy knew there were some out there who wished him harm, and who were waiting for the fall of darkness. Eric, the huge red-haired potboy, had it in for him. On a visit to the castle to deliver some kegs of ale from the village publican, Timothy had espied Eric's cloak hanging on a hook outside the kitchen, and Timothy had explored it, and explored the purse brimming with coins that he found in one of the pockets. Eric hadn't caught him in the act, nor could he prove that Timothy had stolen the money. But he knew it was Timothy, as no one else, no one who knew him, would have had the nerve to rob him. Yes, Eric knew and intended to take it out of Timothy's hide, assisted by his friends Derek and Roger, who were only waiting for the fall of darkness. Well, Timothy just might have a surprise for them. A little surprise for them, too. Darkness comes early at the end of April, and there was a chill in the air. But Timothy didn't mind. A lifetime of rioting in taverns had left him permanently well insulated. The few loiterers that had been hanging around, joking and haranguing him, departed with the dusk. This was not a good night to be outdoors. But Timothy knew he wouldn't be alone for long. After an hour of solitude, he heard the crunch of heavy boots approaching him along the gravel path. And then someone kicked him in the ass, hard. They were here. Eric had come around to the front of the pillory, and kneeling down, grabbed Timothy's ears with his huge freckled hands. "Where's my money, lout? Tell me, eh?" I never took your money," Timothy began to say, but was stopped when Eric slapped his face. Hard. Timothy took a deep breath. That had hurt, and tried again. "Get me out of this thing, and I'll show you where the money is." "I thought you didn't have my money, ass," Eric said, smiling. But before he could slap again, Timothy squealed, "You won't get it back with me trapped in this thing." "Oh, I don't know," Eric said with a predatory smile. "We have all night to get it out of you." "You're going to stay out all night?" Timothy persisted. "On this of all nights? Walpurgis Night? When the dead are abroad?" Eric laughed, but it was not a pleasant laugh. "Oh, I don't think it will take all night to get the information out of you. Will it, lads?" he added, causing Derek and Roger to bark in merriment. "So, you won't get me out of this pillory?" Timothy said sadly. "No, lout, we won't get you out." "Ha! Hey, that rhymes." "No, lout, we won't get you out. Lout, out, lout, out, lout, out. Ha! I'm a poet." "Well, if you won't get me out of the pillory, then I must let myself out." Timothy's remark led to an outburst of hilarity, which ceased after they heard a loud plop, followed by the drunkard's head separating from his body and rising into the air. Eric drew away in horror as Timothy smirked and said, "Didn't know I could do that, did you?" What are you?" Eric stammered. Timothy snapped his jaws, and Eric suddenly became aware that he had a mouthful of razor-sharp teeth. "What am I? What am I?" Timothy squealed, his voice rising to a falsetto. "Why, I am the devil's own! That's what I am! The devil's own!" No longer trapped by the head, Timothy wiggled his hands free and stepped away from the pillory, his body moving without a head. His body walking without a head. Without a head. Walking without a head. Until it burst into a run. Derek and Roger fled screaming, crashing through the trees and the underbrush in their frantic efforts to get away, while Eric tried to shield his face and head from Timothy's snapping teeth, screaming when the flying head tore off his right ear. His right ear! Eric might have escaped, if it hadn't been for the tree limb. But no, he didn't see it, and ran into it, fell on his back, and exposed his throat, and learned that Timothy liked to drink more than just ale. He liked to drink blood! The innkeeper was a heavy-set man with a beetling brow and a bad temper, and a paranoid fear of being robbed, which led him to creep downstairs, an iron bar in hand, when he heard strange sounds coming from below in the middle of the night. Whoever it was wasn't even trying to be quiet. Entering the bar, he was astounded to see chairs and tables overturned or pushed aside, the floor littered with broken bottles and glass. Someone, a shadowy figure, was behind the bar, rifling the cash box. The innkeeper moved slowly forward, trying not to make a sound, as he crept up on the figure. And then he attacked, swinging the iron bar at the robber's head. But the robber didn't have one, didn't have a head. The innkeeper backed away as the headless figure stumbled towards him, But then he heard a noise, a shrill, high-pitched laugh from behind him, and whirling around, he saw a human head, an ugly, greasy human head, hanging in midair, regarding him with sardonic amusement. The innkeeper was so startled, he didn't even recognize the head as Timothy. And then the strong hands of the figure coming up behind him, the figure without a head, closed around his throat and choked the life out of him. The murder and robbery at the inn was a village sensation. Derek and Roger had disappeared, and so were blamed for the crime. They were also accused of the murder of Eric, whose disfigured body had been found in the woods with his throat slashed. The red-bearded potboy was either an accomplice or had been killed trying to stop the thieves. No one knew. The one person no one suspected was Timothy. He'd been bound in the pillory all night. Still, eyebrows were raised a few months later when Timothy announced a long-lost uncle had left him an inheritance. Enough of an inheritance, he was able to purchase the inn, which he then renamed. The inn is now called the Night Floater. Floating heads, aka night floaters or floaters, are paranormal entities reported from around the world. The name refers to the ability of certain individuals to detach their heads from the trunks of their bodies, the heads then being able to fly or float at will. They are said to attack unsuspecting victims, biting them and sometimes even killing them. They make a moaning sound when far away, a sound which fades to silence as they approach their victims. And they are able to direct their bodies and walk around without their heads, i.e., headless. The moral of the story? Don't drink till your teeth are floating. It just might go to your head. If this is your first visit to my channel, please consider subscribing. My name is Warren, and I write and tell original ghost stories and original horror stories featuring such cryptids as the Night Floaters, werewolves, and the Black-Eyed Children. So again, please consider subscribing. Please help me to reach my goal of 2,021 subs in 2021. Till midnight. Cheers. Pictures used in today's video, courtesy of Pix Here. That's PX Here. While the music was the chill-inducing Ghost Processional by that patron of the internet, Kevin MacLeod.